Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction, as Joe Rogan comes curiously close to explaining the plotline of C.S. Lewis's Ransom Space Trilogy, which was an attempt from Lewis to recapture the biblical and medieval cosmology that the modern world had lost. And just for fun, we are going to start with the more ridiculous ideas and move on to the more reasonable ones at the end. So hang in there with me.
Travel to habitable planets, right? So
Can I tell you Terrence Howard's idea?
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
He thinks what happens is the sun is constantly ejecting things, right? You
Yeah.
see these coronal mass ejections. He thinks these particles coalesce in space outside of the gravity of the sun, and they orbit the sun, and very close at first. But then as time goes on, they move further and further away.
Whoa.
And they get to a place where they're in this position like Earth is, and then they people. They flower, just like when you plant a seed, when the water comes,
So
and
cool.
he goes, and then it has to be sophisticated enough to adapt because the planet is eventually going to move out of the habitable zone. And he thinks that Mars, at one point in time, probably had civilization and life. And then as Mars got further and further and further out from the protection of the sun, it eventually got too cold, and it eventually got hit by something, it lost its atmosphere, and now it's just desert.
that's so cool.
Well, now they know there's water on Mars.
Yeah.
They know. It used to be just the craziest of conspiracy
Right.
theories. Oh, there's no water on Mars.
Yeah.
There's no evidence of water. How could a society live there? If you were in Mars and you're 1,000 years advanced from us and they never figure out AI, so they just go in a different direction. They're like super, super advanced, though, where they could travel through the space between the planets. And you get to a point where you're like, hey, guys, we got about a decade.
Yeah.
We got about 1 decade where life can exist on this fucking planet. We got to get off of this now. Earth is ready. There's some monkeys there. There's a bunch of shit there. It's like, we could just go there.
Yeah.
We just go there.
Well,
And then we just monked around with them. Like, these guys are developing like really slowly. Like, why don't we just? And then Homo
Work on 'em.
sapiens. Yay! Look, Homo
there you go.
sapiens.
The whatever it is.
Definitely
I'm
not
sure,
what I just described.
No, whatever it is, it's not that.
I wasn't believing it as I was saying it. I was like, that's crazy.
But dude, I think
maybe.
you look at just the concept of epigenetics and what we're doing right now. You look at the statistical probability of DNA evolving based on the age of the planet. You look at these things, and not just that, you look at the mythologies of the world. It all points towards some kind of advanced intelligence bioengineering a planet for some reason or another. I mean, even like, have you ever read the parable of the sower? You know that Jesus said. Do you mind pulling that up, Jamie? I don't have it memorized yet. The parable of the sower.
Have you seen the recent images that they got from Mars of that big square?
Mm-hmm.
What the is that?
It's one of those things where I was talking to Jamie just before the show. It is a bad day to be a professional skeptic. I'm telling you what. You've been making you're living the last 20 years poo-pooing all the aliens and UFO shit and whatnot. Man, oh man, is it a rough day for you? Because if that same shit was LiDAR from the South American forest, you'd be like, yeah, there's probably a village there. That makes sense.
This is even more clear than LiDAR.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
It's super
it's above
square.
the surface.
Yeah,
Jamie,
super
pull a
square.
photo of it up. So this square, it's really crazy because it's right angle, right angle, right angle, right angle.
Yeah, and doesn't look to be very asymmetrical
This
either.
one says like they added that square so you
Yeah.
can see it better. It's like superimposed on that one.
Yeah, but this is the original image. Just this alone,
Yeah,
you're like, what the
Like I
is
said,
that?
if you were to tell me that was a LiDAR picture from South America, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. It's just too convenient that it makes a square. It just seems so weird.
It is.
So if we think of the heavens as just space, which is the modern shift away from the biblical cosmology that C.S. Lewis was trying to address in his trilogy, then the risk is that the earth just becomes a pale blue dot in an empty, lifeless vacuum. And that has real consequences. And so one of the things that I like about this conversation with Joe, even though it's fiction, we're sort of having fun, it opens up the door to consider that the world is more than just the materialist explanation. Does your worldview have enough strength, and is it robust enough to really explain the world the way it actually is? Or are you opening yourself up to deception, which is interestingly where Lewis is going to conclude his Ransom trilogy, with the third book dealing a lot with how earthly political forces unite with rebellious spiritual forces to deceive people. It deals a lot with the concept of propaganda. I think another thing that we lose, not only do we open ourselves up to the possibility of being deceived and convinced that the world is not quite, what it really is, I think we lose something. And I come at this as a Christian person, and I wonder if, my biblical Christian worldview can help me explain something like this. Can I explain why there's a square on Mars? Is that really Mars? Are you sure that's not just a picture of some desert on Earth? I don't know, but if someone showed me a structure on Mars, would it completely annihilate my Christian worldview? No, it wouldn't, because I think the biblical cosmology is robust enough to explain what I might be seeing. But the other thing that, and I don't want to lose, is what Lewis is touching at here. He couldn't call space dead. He felt life pouring into him. This is Ransom as he travels through space from every moment. How indeed should it be otherwise, since out of this ocean all worlds and all their life has come? He had thought it barren. He now saw that it was the womb of the worlds, whose blazing and innumerable offspring looked down nightly even upon the earth with so many eyes. No, space was the wrong name. Older thinkers, he's talking about the medievals here, older thinkers had been wiser when they made it simply the heavens that declare the glory of God. So he moves from medieval back to the biblical. He's thinking that the medieval might be a way for the modern man to find his way back to the biblical. The heavens declare the glory of God. God is alive. So naturally, we see life in creation. And if we move away from that, if we move away from the biblical Christian cosmology, I think we do open ourselves up to deception, because we no longer see ourselves as significant. We no longer see ourselves as made in the image of God, but we also don't see the purpose of life here on this planet to participate in what God has created, ultimately his heavenly kingdom. So that's where Joe actually goes in this next clip. Joe is going to consider in this next clip, and I think consider rightly, that there is some deception going on, and you can hear in this the desire for a better explanation.
That's my whole UFO take, because I want them to be real so bad.
I want them to be real
Look, I got
so
one on
badly.
my desk here. I want them to be real so bad, but the more I look into it, the more I don't believe. The
Really?
More, yeah. I think a lot of it is horse, a lot of it, but also maybe some of it's real.
It's so unsettling to think that we're the only things out there for me that I wanted to. It's like, that can't be, surely.
It doesn't seem like it even makes sense that that's true, so I don't think that that's true. But I do not know if we've been visited, but I think a lot of it is bullshit. I think it's not just bullshit. I think it's probably government-coordinated bullshit. I think there's probably sightings that are mass PSYOPs where they're trying to see how people react to things. I think there's probably crafts that the United States is in possession of that absolutely look like UFOs. I think there's probably propulsion systems that they use for drones that are infinitely more advanced than we currently think the state-of-the-art is.
And so they'd say, oh, it's UFO, and it's really their technology.
But that doesn't account for the sightings that occurred when it was impossible for that technology to exist.
Right.
That doesn't take you back to like 1950s with Kenneth Arnold, where he saw these flying discs moving through the sky, which is where the term flying saucer came from, because it was like saucer skipping across a lake.
And what about all the people kind of all over the world who have experienced like a similar thing? And why do all the drawings always look the same? Is that just collective conscious? People have seen one and then they think that, or is it, you know how they
There's a
always
lot of
look like
possibilities.
aliens?
There's a lot of possibilities. And another possibility is that the world's not real.
And we're in a simulation.
Yeah, that there's something, maybe saying the world's not real is not the best way to put it.
It makes me so like, I want to crawl out of my skin.
Maybe the best way to put it is that it's not real the way we think it's real. Like, there's real consequences to your actions. There's real physical laws that exist in the experience that you're having as a conscious creature moving through this world. But this world's not totally solid all the time. It's solid when you interact with it.
All right. So we can't be just the only beings out there, and yet we're still seem to be trapped in this material explanation, the materialist explanation. It's really interesting that this is such a new idea, and yet it's very powerful. It seems to hold sway in culture today, because 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 250 years ago, it would have been easy to say, yeah, there's spirits out there. We're certainly not the only beings in the world. And so then but since we're captured by this sort of reductionist materialism, we scramble to try to explain, like, is it just a bunch of BS? Is it just a bunch of, silly people believing silly things? Is it a mass operation, meant to deceive, going back to the Lewis trilogy? Are there some advanced technologies out there that are, we're not supposed to know about yet, and people see it and then they don't explain it? But then what do you do with the ancient accounts? What do you do with 1950s? What do you do with all the ancient history that seems to account for the fact that there's more going on in the world? And so, sort of our modern mind goes into simulation theory or something like this, but I want you to hear what Joe is saying is like, the world isn't just solid. I mean, I don't know if he's saying this, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's like, the world isn't just matter. The world isn't just the material world. That's part of it. There is more going on. And I think that there are people pretending like they believe the world is still material. And I wonder if some of it is kind of a parlor trick. Like, there are people in power who are trying to convince regular everyday people that the world's just material and you just evolved from animals, because then you're easier to control. Annie Crawford on the platform formerly known as Twitter, I thought, had some interesting insight that takes us back to the C.S. Lewis conversation. And if you don't follow Annie on the platform formerly known as Twitter, great account to follow. I finally realized the significance of the change in the language of UFO to UAP, right? Back in the day, it was just UFOs, unidentified flying objects. That's material, right? That's a physical thing. To UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. It's a phenomenon now. Now it's not an object, it's a phenomenon. When moving from, sorry, this is really small and I keep forgetting to do that. When moving from an object to a phenomenon, the experience in question need not exist outside of one's own head to be real. So we're just planting ideas now, and maybe this takes us to the parable of the sower that I, never let Duncan kind of explain earlier here, but the experience in question need not exist outside one's own head to be real. So what I said is, when they start talking about macrobes, we'll know that we've crossed over into the realm where reality is stranger than fiction. And Annie said, yes, although every time they talk about transhuman intelligence, we're already discussing macrobes. Now, in C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, macrobes was the word that he used when trying to describe essentially angels and demons, right? Microbes are smaller living organisms. Macrobes are larger, but they're still beings, right? And so we're not the only beings in this world, and yet the materialist language, it sort of carries on. Macrobes, they're not angels and demons. We're not going to the Bible stuff, We're not going into that medieval cosmology or that biblical cosmology. We need to sort of hang on to our materialist definitions. And so, yes, they're talking about transhuman intelligences. They're using all these different words to really, I think, they're talking to really obfuscate the fact that we are really talking about what the Bible has already explained. There is a cosmic battle going on between those who are rebellious to God and those who are living in harmony to God. Now, I want to close with this idea. If Christians just disregard these types of narratives, if we just listen to Duncan Trussell and Joe Rogan, we sort of go, that's silliness and goofy, and we think of ourselves as more sophisticated and less foolish than that, and we dismiss these ridiculous narratives and never really engage in them, then we never get to the point where we get to, I think, share our truth. I saw this with the Billy Carson example. Billy Carson said a lot of ridiculous stuff. He said a lot of ridiculous stuff on Joe Rogan, Patrick Bet David, and all over the internet. I think probably, tens of millions of views engaged with Billy Carson's ideas. But then nobody really challenged Billy until Wesley Huff decided to engage with his ideas. Now, as soon as Wes, a Christian with a biblical worldview, engaged with Billy Carson's ideas, the whole parlor trick fell to the ground. You just start to ask a few really good questions and the whole thing falls apart. I think, as a Christian person, maybe even at this point speaking to other Christians, though I know not everybody who finds this channel is a Christian, so thank you for being here. I wonder if we need to, again, kind of start with the ridiculous and be able to engage with the ridiculous so that we can demonstrate that there are other explanations out there. It's just that they've been with us for so long and the modern world doesn't want to engage with them anymore. I wonder if it's because Christians have maybe not done a great job of representing the message of the gospel and how robust, how broad it can be, that it can look at, squares on Mars and not really shudder at that. We can kind of go, that's interesting, maybe Lewis was onto something. But it just doesn't, it doesn't freak us out, I think, the way maybe the modern person might flounder and try to explain, like, I don't know. Let me know what you think at this point, because I think there's a lot more to be explored within the biblical cosmology than we give credit to. Every time I read the Bible, I feel like I explore something new. So if you feel the same way, or if you're just kind of like on the journey, let me know. I'd love to get some feedback on this video as I kind of patch through a lot of stuff. And sometimes when I do that, I feel like my thinking is not super clear. So hopefully the message got through in the midst of kind of jumping around. And thank you for being here at the end. Like, share. I would like you to share it and then continue the conversation with someone else, or give me a comment and let me know what you're thinking at this point. And I will catch you in the next one.